Hello and welcome back. So this is the third video in our video series for chapter 1. So we are entering into 1.3 molecules of life, lipids. So as you can see here, we have a block of butter or planta or whatever this is, and you can already imagine that we are going to talk about very fatty things. So first things first, let's look at the learning outcomes. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to state the types of lipids, such as triglycerides, which are fats and oils, phospholipids, and steroids. You should also be able to describe the structure of fatty acids and glycerols and explain the formation and breakdown of triglycerides. So let's talk about what is lipid. A lipid is a water-insoluble organic molecule but soluble in organic solvents such as alcohol, ether, and chloroform. So kamu bayangkan benda yang berlemak-lemak, dia tidak larut dalam air, dia larut dalam organic solvent yang lain, macam alcohol, ether, chloroform. So lipids will contain CHNO, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So a lot like the carbohydrates, but the proportion of oxygen is lower than in carbohydrate. Beza dia dengan karbohidrat adalah dia lebih sedikit oksigen. The functions of lipid include being a component of the cell membrane, it is used as an energy storage, and cell signaling and insulation. So in this diagram down here, we have an example of lipid, which is phospholipid in the phospholipid bilayer of your cell membrane. Okay, itu salah satu contoh. Let us look at the different types of lipids. Bila kita cakap pasal jenis lipid, kita ada jenis pertama. First type is triglycerides, which are fat and oil. Second is phospholipid. In here it is lecithin or lecithin. I think it's lecithin. And number 3, steroid, which includes cholesterol and testosterone. Now, before I go into it, do not come into lipids with the expectations you had for carbohydrates. Dalam karbohidrat kita belajar dia ada monomer. Kalau dia dua monomer sama-sama, dia dipanggil sebagai disaccharide. Okay, kalau banyak dia punya monomer satu kali, kita panggil polysaccharide. Tapi lipid tidak macam tu. Lipid dia tiada monomer, dia tiada basic unit. Dia memang itu triglyceride, itulah bentuk dia. Tiada gabung-gabung. Okay. Satu gabungan, but then that becomes triglycerides lah. Okay. The important thing is it's not a polymer. It's not the same thing repeating. It's just one long thing. So these 3 types of lipids that we have here are 3 different types. Not different level, just different types. Okay, let us go in before I confuse you too much. Okay. Let's look at the first type of lipid, which is triglyceride. Triglycerides are formed by the ester linkage of 3 fatty acids to 1 glycerol molecule. So you can see here, there is 3 fatty acids. Each of these yellow boxes is 1 fatty acid. 1 glycerol molecule, which is this gray block over here, made of 3 carbons. And they are held together by ester linkage. So yang kamu nampak O, C, double bond O, itu adalah ester linkage. So when you see something like this is a triglyceride. I think you have gone through this in your middle school science, biology stuff. So it shouldn't be too foreign to you. Tidaklah pelik sangat. Rasanya pernah nampak juga. Okay, let's talk about the structure of fatty acids. Kita tengok setiap ekor-ekor dia ni. Mari kita tengok bentuk structure ekor tu. So the structure of a fatty acid. A fatty acid has a long carbon skeleton, usually about 16 to 18 carbon atoms. Kalau ada yang belum jelas apa itu carbon skeleton, kamu nampak yang ni? Kamu nampak ni? Ni. Yang banyak sisi. That is carbon skeleton. So, bila kita tengok carbon skeleton untuk fatty acid, dia adalah panjang. 16 hingga 18 carbon. The carbon at one end is part of a carboxyl group. So yang C double bond O, lepas tu C single bond OH, itu adalah carboxyl group. So maksud ayat ini adalah karbon pada satu hujung adalah sebahagian daripada carboxyl group. That's the carboxyl group for the second fatty acid. And then this carboxyl group is attached to long hydrocarbon chain. Long hydrocarbon chain is non-polar carbon-hydrogen bonds. So these are the long hydrocarbon chains. Yalah, hydrocarbon chain, carbon, hydrogen. Okay, and these hydrocarbon chains are the reasons why fats are hydrophobic. Disebabkan dia non-polar, dia tidak boleh larut dalam air yang boleh larutkan polar molecules. Okay, moving on. So when we talk about these fatty acids, these ekor-ekor panjang, there are two types. You can have saturated fatty acid or unsaturated fatty acid. Saturated fatty acid contain only single covalent bonds between carbon atoms and they lack double bonds. The hydrocarbon chain is saturated with hydrogen atoms. So kamu nampak di sini saturated fatty acid adalah chain yang di bahagian atas ni. Dia memang single bond saja. Semua karbon dia berkawan dengan hydrogen. Berkawan dengan 2 atau 3 hydrogen. Saturated kita boleh cakap dia at maximum capacity, dia padat, dia pekat, whichever kinds of those words that give the same meaning in your head. Okay, saturated dia macam pekat, dia penuh. Unsaturated pula tidak berapa penuh lah. Unsaturated fatty acid will contain one or more double covalent bonds between carbon atoms. Sini kamu nampak ni ada yang C double bond C, terus sini terkurang dia punya H. Ini pun C double bond C kurang H kurang H. That is what is meant by the double covalent bonds. In unsaturated fatty acids, hydrocarbon chains are not completely saturated with hydrogen bonds. Ada boleh masuk lagi. That's what it means. Okay, so that is the C double bonds. These fatty acids will have the presence or the absence of the double bond will have a significant effect on the thing itself. So kalau kita mau tahu benda itu adalah saturated fatty acid ataupun unsaturated fatty acid, kita tengok dia punya state of matter at room temperature. Pada suhu bilik adakah dia pejal ataupun dia cecair. Kalau pada suhu bilik dia pejal, okay, if it's solid at room temperature, most likely what you're looking at is saturated fat and fatty acids, like this block of butter dan planta. If it is liquid at room temperature, kalau dia cair pada suhu bilik, most likely what you are looking at is unsaturated fat and fatty acids, macam minyak masak. And the reason for that is because of the structure. Bila dia single bond sahaja, like in saturated fatty acid, this stearic acid, the fatty acid becomes rigid. Dia macam keras, dia tidak berapa bergerak-gerak. But when it is unsaturated, when it has these double bonds, these hydrocarbon chains tend to bend. Dia akan dia lebih cenderung untuk bengkok. Is there a proper word for bengkok? I'm not sure. Okay, but basically the hydrocarbon chains will bend. Or sometimes you can see in the books, they describe this as kinks in the chain. Okay, so nampaklah dia bengkok di sana. Okay, so that is it for fatty acids. Let us look at the next one, which is the structure of glycerol. So this is the gray block on the left just now. Glycerols are organic compounds that are also referred to as glycerin, and it consists of a chain of 3 carbon atoms. So, kamu nampak sini 1, 2, 3 carbon. Oops. Move my face. Okay. So, it consists of 3 carbon chain. Each of the carbon atoms is bonded to hydrogen atoms and a hydroxyl group. So sebelah kanan dia ada OH, kanan dia ada OH, kanan dia ada OH. Selebihnya hydrogen, 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 hydrogen. So this is a glycerol. Remember, we're still talking about the first type of lipid, which is triglyceride. Kita boleh ambil 3 fatty acid, gabungkan dengan satu glycerol untuk dapatkan triglyceride. So this is the process or the formation of triglycerides. Just like what we did with the diagram in carbohydrates, okay, kita perlu ambil H sebelah sini, OH sebelah sini, lukislah garisan putus-putus, and then you will get this. Now you notice there is R, R, R in the diagram for the fatty acids. Remember, R we can use to describe hydrocarbon chains. Okay, di sini memang ada banyak lagi karbon dan hidrogen dan sebagainya, tapi sebab mau jimat masa ataupun maklumat itu kurang penting, jadi kita singkatkan saja kepada R. Okay. So when it's like this is glycerol, 3 fatty acid, this is triglyceride. Remember to label the ester linkage. The ester linkage is this oxygen, single bond, carbon, double bond, oxygen. That is ester linkage. Okay, bila dia bergabung, proses dia adalah condensation ataupun esterification. Kalau kamu guna gambar raja yang sama, kamu kasih terbalik saja anak panah dia untuk kasih pisah triglyceride. That is hydrolysis. Condensation produces 3 molecules of water. Hydrolysis, you will use the 3 molecules of water. Di sini tiada benda terkeluar lah. Okay. So here we have some points about the formation of triglycerides and the breakdowns of triglyceride. Kamu boleh tengok point dia satu-satu, mana tahu kamu jumpa soalan esei dan kamu mau cuba menjawab. So you can find the points here. Okay, so this is just a diagram to show how the lipids look like when you look at the atoms one by one. So di sebelah sini yang merah-merah tu adalah oksigen ya. Jangan terbingung. Okay. Okay, let us move on to the second type of lipid. The second type of lipid is phospholipid. What's a phospholipid? Yes, it's the thing in your plasma membrane, but more accurately, phospholipids are when you have 2 fatty acids that are attached to glycerol and a phosphate group. Tadi triglyceride dia 3 fatty acid. Sekarang dia 2 saja. Satu ruang kosong itu diambil oleh phosphate group. Phosphate group will carry a negative charge. That means additional smaller groups may be attached to the phosphate group. The most common example of phospholipid that we use is lecithin, which is the thing in your plasma membrane lah, in your cell membrane. When phospholipids are added to water, they self-assemble into aggregates with the hydrophobic tails pointing toward the center and the hydrophilic heads on the outside. Apa yang dimaksudkan dengan poin ini? Kalau kita ambil banyak phospholipid, ambil satu genggam, buang dalam air, they will form this shape, which is called a micelle. Yes, like micellar water. Okay, and this is what it looks like. The hydrophilic head will automatically go outside where it is near the water. The hydrophobic tail sama-sama penakut, jadi sama-sama sorok di dalam. When you have 2 layers of this, then you can have the phospholipid bilayer. Okay, let's talk about phospholipid bilayer. At the surface of a cell, they will be arranged as a bilayer. The hydrophilic cell. Ini lebih kurang apa yang kamu sudah pernah belajar pasal plasma membrane sebelum ni. And phospholipids, particularly lecithin, will be the major component of plasma membrane. Diorang yang jadi main component lah dalam plasma membrane. The importance of lecithin in cell membrane structure, it will act as a semi-permeable barrier so that exchanges across this membrane are limited and slow. It is permeable to water molecules but not to ions such as sodium, potassium, and chloride ion. Okay, itu sekian untuk phospholipid. Dan kita pergi kepada jenis ketiga. We're going on into the third type of lipid, which is steroids. So steroids are smaller than the other ones. They are insoluble in water, but they are soluble in lipid. Kalau kita masukkan steroid dalam minyak, dia akan terlarut. They will have 4 hydrocarbon ring structure with different functional side chain. So you see here 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. An example of steroid is cholesterol. Cholesterol is the precursor of steroid hormones such as testosterone and estrogen. So, kolesterol itu boleh diubah menjadi bentuk testosteron dan estrogen. And it is a component of the cell membrane which functions to help in maintaining the fluidity of cell membrane. Kita akan jumpa lagi Kita akan jumpa lagi kolesterol bila kita masuk chapter 2 nanti. Kita belajar pasal plasma membrane. Okay, but basically, you can start memorizing this point now. Okay, sekian. Itu saja. Yang paling complicated itu triglyceride. For phospholipid and steroids, it's a lot simpler. Why is it important for us to learn the lemak-lemak? What is the importance of lipids? Well, first of all, lipids are important for energy storage. You don't just use carbohydrates, you can also burn your fat for energy. Second is lipids are important because they are components of cell membrane. Third is that lipids are important for insulation. For example, in blubber. Blubber is what you call the fat of whales and other sea animals, which you can harvest and then you can get oil. Another example is if you were someone who had a higher body weight, contohnya dulu kamu gemuk kan, and then sekarang slim sudah, you feel that you are a lot colder or you sweat less compared to when you were overweight because you lost your layer of lipid insulation when you lost the fat. Okay, so that's an example. And number 4, lipids are important carriers or precursors of important flavor and odor compounds. So they can be used for flavor, for odor. That's maybe less, sometimes scientific use, sometimes just for cooking use. And number 5, lipids are important because they transport fat-soluble vitamins. Not all vitamins are soluble in water. Some of them are lipid-soluble. And number 6, lipids are important. It's important to learn about lipids, basically, because it contributes to obesity, coronary heart disease, and other health problems. Jadi, lebih kita faham pasal lipid, lebih kita tahu macam mana mau prevent and cure these diseases. Okay. Alright, so just a quick overview. We looked at 3 main groups of lipids, which is the triglycerides, fats, and oils. And we also look at saturated versus unsaturated fatty acids. Number 2, we look at phospholipids. And number 3, we looked at steroids. We focus more on cholesterol rather than testosterone in these notes. Okay. So once again, these are the learning outcomes, and I hope that you will be able to achieve them. What should you do now? I would like you to take out a piece of paper or on whatever fancy software you have. Draw the formation of triglyceride. Soalan dia pendek tapi lukisannya banyak. So, cuba try test. And when you are done, please upload your answer in the Google Classroom. That's all for this video. Thank you very much, and I'll see you again.